Here we go. Hello, everyone. It's that time again for the monthly video blog from me, founder and president of the Turning of the Ages Mystery School. And I'm here today with Managing Director Awen, who is going to be helping me out on this and having a little bit of dialogue, but he'll be managing the array of slides that we have today. And what I wanted to bring to everyone's attention are a lot of things that have to do with what's happening in the world. From the vantage point of living outside of the country now for a long time, it becomes ever more apparent and evident that what people see as the news in the United States, unless they have a lot of time on their hands to do research, which many people don't. I find myself in a position where I can research a lot, which is just such a pleasure having a Capricorn moon, because I just love researching. So I'm going to be bringing a bunch of stuff to your attention that you might not be aware of that fit into what is happening over these next weeks, over this next month. In fact, what I want to start with is the eclipse season, which is happening really soon. We're moving into the eclipse season at the new moon. So I'd like to start by having a little bit of tuning into the eclipse season, and then we'll take it from there. So Awen, why don't you put up the eclipse chart for new moon. One thing that has been a specialty of our school for many years now is the whole understanding of eclipse seasons, of which there are 2 every year. Now, occasionally there are 3 eclipses in an eclipse season, and then it's a slightly longer eclipse season. But the ones this year have only had the usual number 2 in each eclipse season. And so here we have the partial solar eclipse that will be actually almost full. I mean, it's at a 0.862, where 1.0 is the edge of totality. It will not be visible in the United States or anywhere, Mexico, Canada, South America, and like that. But before we take a look at the eclipse path, I just wanted to point out a few important items here. Notice where the nodal axis is. 13 Scorpio, 13 Taurus, and its relationship with the sun and the moon and Venus, and certainly one of the great features, important features of this eclipse would be the fact that the sun and Venus are so close together there. I actually did a TV show interview yesterday where a lot of focus was placed on that Saturn-Venus conjunction on the other side of the sun, and of course in our view, that's Venus in the underworld. So that's kind of like Plutonian. And then we have the Venus position close to the south node. But just remember these degrees as we go forward. 2 degree Scorpio sun, and then the nodal axis at 13 Taurus, 13 Scorpio. Let's take a quick look at the eclipse path. So you get this will fit into what we'll be discussing as we go through here. So as you'll see here, the partial, almost full eclipse is going through central Russia, and it will extend down through Kazakhstan, almost, well, a little tiny bit into Uzbekistan. But you'll see that also that it stretches, the partial part of it will stretch down to into the Ukraine. Actually, there's a partial in Kiev and Kharkov and those places. So we could say this is the Russian, central Russian partial eclipse that is happening. And just keep that in mind as we go through some of the other stuff we're going to be talking about here. We may come back to this if we need to. So let's look at the total lunar eclipse. Let's first take a look at the chart of that. And notice again where the nodes are and what the degrees are of Mercury and the Sun. Actually, that, of course, I think most everybody is aware that that eclipse is happening on U.S. election day. I saw some research that there's never been a total eclipse on the U.S. election day. And the nodal axis is still in the same place. And if you want to look at the other aspects of this, we're still in that final sort of the latter remnants of the last nearly exact Saturn-Uranus square, which Saturn definitely is making a play here toward the nodal axis. So just keep in mind those degrees. And this is a particularly long total lunar eclipse. And well, one of the things I wanted to mention is that with all the charts that we're going to be looking through, the slides that we've prepared for this will be a very handy reference for anyone who wants to do further research on the topics I'm going to be bringing up here, and as we look at the variety of different horoscopes. But I thought it would be really important to start with the eclipse chart, since that's probably the most important thing on people's minds right now. Our newsletter that's going out tomorrow will actually has an article, a video from Eric about this Scorpio new moon solar eclipse. And we've been talking about this all the way back through the year. You know, that you can actually reference some of the other presentations we've done during solstice and equinox events. And I think there's even a video blog on the subject. And those are all referenced now on our new website, I think, quite well. There's a whole table of contents for the video blogs, and also you can see all the equinox and solstice event seminars all the way back to, I think it's all the way back to 2018 now, I think. They're up there. Isn't that right? I think so, yeah.
At least back that far.
Yeah. Now let's take a look at the pathway of this, where it will be total. So the entirety of large portions, again, of Russia, Eastern Russia, through the Pacific, it's total in New Zealand. We're actually going to have totality where we live here in the Philippines. Hawaii gets a marvelous experience of it. And you can see the line of total totality does cut through the U.S. And you're going to be able to have a totality experience there in Bisbee, and people on the West Coast, people in Arizona, that western part of the U.S. will have a ringside seat for this. Usually about half the world will have some percentage of the eclipse, but this is what you're seeing here is the where it will be total. Now, as I mentioned, this is a particularly long one, 5 hours and 54 minutes, including the partial, like where the moon will start to shrink down to totality. And the totality is 1 hour and 1 hour and 25 minutes. So that's a pretty long portal. And then there'll be another few hours as the new moon it'll seem like a new moon. I mean, no moon, and then there'll be a tiny little crescent, and then it'll come all the way back to full. So you have in that 5 hour and 54-minute time period a really a tremendous time period to do ceremony, to tune in the variety of ways you like to do that. We have a suggested framework for that, which is in the time frame prior to the portal of totality, as the moon is shrinking, is being a very good time, whether you have anything personal on your chart or not, to consider and having the courage to bring up where the shadow material, the hidden material, relative to the mystery schools of Taurus and Scorpio have been. Let's say in the last, we can speak maybe back 10,000 years, back to the younger Dryas. It's pretty speculative beyond that. But where have the shadow of these mystery schools been? And our talk here today is beyond the scope of going into that in greater depth. I would suggest the previous seminars and also the video blogs that we've done on the evolution of the mystery schools and the shadow of the mystery schools. But then, of course, if you have something important on your own chart that are near the degrees, where the nodal axis degrees are and where the degrees of the sun and the moon are, then you can work with your own material on that. And then as you go into the portal of totality, that's really a time to just go into spaciousness and be within yourself, and to receive transmissions, because it really is a portal. One of the things we've been working on recently is considering the difference between the experience of the day of a total lunar eclipse when you don't see it, where the sun is shining completely through in that area of the world, and then where it's blocked, in the area of the world, half the world that's getting a total or partial lunar eclipse. And we're just kind of tuning into that stuff right now. Then there's the other issue about the importance, like things like how long does the eclipse effect last? And I don't know of a conclusive answer to that. I'm thinking of at least 3 years. Maybe if it's a really important one, you look at the Saros on it, the 18, slightly past 18-year cycle on it. And then also, where in the world does the path of a partial or a total solar eclipse happen? And then where does it occur? What part of the world for a total lunar eclipse? And this is why we shared with you here the pathways, because I think it's significant that the nearly total solar is passing through central Russia down through those Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan that used to be part of the Soviet Union. Now, there's another factor something I've only just recently discovered. Now, there could be people listening to this that already knew this, but I never encountered it before, which is that if you take 5 18.6-year nodal cycles, that actually after 5, it comes back to the starting point on any given date. It's a 93-year cycle. Just having discovered this recently, becoming aware of this, I didn't discover it, becoming aware of it recently, I think it does have some relationship to our timeline material, which is around 90, 3 Saturn returns, the saeculum, the whole thing on the whole timeline philosophy that we have. And now we have something else, the return of the nodal axis to where it started from. So I want to illustrate this by something that can come into our speculations today, which is a 1929 chart, which is the chart of Black Thursday of the stock market crash. when you look up stock market crash, they'll give you dates from the 24th to the 29th of October. This is the one of the so-called Black Thursday. And you will notice, look at the nodal axis, 12. I mean, this whole time frame is exactly the return, really, of give or take the weeks. I mean, so it's hard to specify one exact precise date, but it's in that eclipse zone, the nodal axis zone. And if you look back 18.6 years and then a previous 18.6 years, it doesn't come out to the date of the starting point. So it's kind of like a synodic return of the nodal axis back to a starting point. And this happens, it's what you see, just so happens 1929 was 93 years, right? So I look at that. Actually, some of the same eclipses were happening during that time period. It's not the same Saros, it's not the same eclipse families, but it certainly is the same nodal axis family. And you'll see some of the other factors that were happening around that time. Pluto conjunct the Cancer moon, and then also you'll see the Mars in Scorpio position and the Sun at 0 Scorpio. All of these, and Chiron at 12 Taurus. So I'm just pointing out these degrees of the zodiac that should capture our attention. So I wouldn't be looking at this chart from the perspective of the angles of the chart, because that depends on what time you use, what specific date you use. But what I'm highlighting here is the nodal axis and that 93-year cycle. And while I'm not in any way here doing any prediction work here, and our school doesn't do prediction, we just try to tune into what the intent of a certain time frame is. And there's a great number of alternative websites that talk about looking at it from the perspective of what happened in 1929. Well, there'll be another stock market crash, but I would like, not necessarily. What I would suspect is, though, that this is symbolic of the huge run-up now to a digital monetary system and the elimination of cash in many places. And, the so-called I won't call it great, but it's called the Great Reset, and like the development of a completely new approach to how the world does money. Again, these are just some things to consider based on this 93-year cycle and the position that you can see here of the nodal axis. So why don't we shift to look? We've seen this many times on previous presentations, the US chart.
Could I just ask you, Daniel, to clarify, the 93-year cycle is not the only time that the nodes are in Scorpio and Taurus, but that they're in Scorpio and Taurus and Sun is at the same degree? Is the relationship
they're back to the starting point of any given date, So in our school, the definition of a synodic cycle is the relationship between the planet, or in this case, the nodal degree, the north node, relative to the sun. I mean, so it's relative to the sun because we're taking it back to the same day and year, or roughly the same day and year. If I could share to make it more clear, there can be a zodiacal Venus return. I'm just using Venus as an example every year, but a true synodic Venus return is only every 8 years. Because if you look at where Venus comes back to, like, say, a starting point at its degree, it's not happening at the same season. It jumps around all over the place. So when you have a true synodic planetary return, or in this case, a nodal synodic return, it's zeroing in on a specific starting date. So looking at if you're going to say, well, what was the birth chart of the stock market crash, well, then that's based on that. It's like a solar, that's where the sun was, right? I mean, and so then it's when 93, you have to wait 93 years for it to come back to that same area on that same date. And does that help?
Yes, got it. Thank you.
Thank you for the clarification, having a chance to further clarify that. It's important. Because there can be a confusion out there, or like, I won't say confusion, but just you coming up with a different way of understanding these things. That so other astrologers might say, I'm having a Venus return next month, you know, which just simply means that Venus is back to their original zodiacal degree. But if it's not happening anywhere near the birthday, then you do not have the recreation of the original Sun Venus angle, which was the original set of instructions. So this is like the original set of instructions of whatever that stock market crash was about, whatever version of it you want to understand, which, you know, was it the conspiracy of the bankers? You know, there's so many ways you can look at that. It was it went into another kind of reset that was happening as we went through the Great Depression. Beyond the speculation here at this moment around that, we actually have talked about that before. The bifurcation, what happened in the 30s, the different choices that the world made then, that culminated in the choices made right after World War II. So let's take a look next at the US chart, which we've looked at many times. And keeping in mind some of the degrees that we've looked at. There is an interesting, of course, relationship. Oh, here we go. Yeah, here's the US. I use the Rajarian, Dane Rajar's rectification of it. Not every astrologer uses this chart, but it's the one that I find, that I work with and that I find works really well. And while you're not really seeing the Taurus Scorpio degrees showing up here, I want, by looking at the US chart here, I want to bring in three other important features that will show up as we go through the rest of the charts we're going to look at. Notice the moon, 27 Aquarius. Notice, of course, the amazing, well, look at Pluto, of course. So we're coming into the third exact Pluto return to the natal chart. And so keep in mind that zone 26, 27 degree Capricorn. I mean, today as we speak, Pluto is around 26, I think it's 2608, 2609 Capricorn. And then also the other thing to keep in mind with reference to the US chart would be the Mars position, 21 Gemini. I've written and spoken extensively on that position, the square to Neptune at 22 Taurus, and we're coming to the end of the U.S. Neptune opposition here, right around, pretty much around the same time as the end of the Pluto return to the natal Pluto position. So keep in mind the Taurus-Scorpio axis we talked about, and then also this Aquarius moon, and then the 26, 27, the Pluto position on the US chart, and Mars in Gemini as we move forward. So the next chart that I think it would be useful to put up would be the chart of the European Union. (1993), November 1st. Now, one of the things that you can't help but miss by looking at this chart is that the European Union is in their Saturn return, 23 degrees Aquarius. Think of that in relationship to the US moon. but it's a Saturn return, and apply what we know about Saturn returns to what we know about it on an individual chart, and now we're applying it to that grand experiment called the European Union. But then look elsewhere here. Look down at the Sun and Mercury and Mars, even the IC. And this is actually a recognized time. I'm not quite sure why they determined it this way, but this is what shows up in all the documentation. 12:01 a.m. on November 1st. So we have the eclipse coming up in, at the new moon, right on the midheaven and the IC, which I find very, very interesting, as well as the activation of all those other Scorpio degrees that you can see there. You're not going to find this information from the mainstream media in the US, but again, from the vantage point of looking at other news sources and seeing it from the perspective, not necessarily the Philippines. Philippines just uses US news sources, but you can actually look at other sites, other alternative ways of looking at what's happening in Europe. And there's a great deal of speculation based on different elections that have happened in the countries of the EU, as well as the economic disaster that has become a good portion of that part of Europe. The decisions made by the leadership, most of which unelected, of the EU, that the breakup of the EU, basically that the project may in fact be over. And if we look at the eclipses relative to this chart, and if you look at the Saturn return aspect, it's got to change its mission and purpose statement, I would think. Rather than, maybe it started out with a certain degree of idealism, maybe not. There's many different views on that. But this is certainly a critical turning point here for the European Union. Using the clues associated from shamanic astrology and the totems, the astrological paradigm, the storyline is the Leo job in the Leo tribe. Now, could this actually be the shadow of that? We are the main leader of the EU came out recently, and they basically said something. I don't know if you ever. It's an amazing interview they had with him. Where he said that the EU is the garden and the rest of the world is the jungle, and our job is to tend the garden. Which is, to me, like a rather elitist and neo-colonial statement coming from the head of this body. So fascinating. Just keep those things in mind, because you probably not have heard some of this stuff. All right. Let's next look at the chart of NATO. April 4th, 1949. Now, to me, what got my attention here was the Gemini moon. And the relationship of that with the US Mars in Gemini. Also, you'll note that there's that Jupiter position at 29 Capricorn, which actually could be thought of as a really nice link with well, let me reframe that. It's really close to the US Pluto. Okay. And also the Virgo ascendant does have a relationship with the US Neptune Mars square. We do not see here the relationship between the Taurus Scorpio axis, but the eclipses of next year, and the nodal axis is going to go into Libra Aries next year. We'll certainly have a lot of things to talk about regarding that. But I think there's a great deal to unpack here in looking at this chart relative to the difference between the original purpose of NATO, which was the defense pact, and then turning into basically an aggressive force. Mars and Aries, Venus and Sun, that's Mars in the underworld, Venus in the underworld and Aries. So it's actually become also kind of a neo-colonial imperialist kind of body that wants to add more and more and more countries, which was never part of their original charter. So this is the 73rd year of NATO. So this is yet another thing. I'm just really suggesting people to who are interested in world events, what's happening in the world right now, within the context of so many of the other things we've talked about regarding the great turning of the ages, the convergence of 6 different timelines in these next few years, to keep in mind what this chart is and what its intent is. And there we have that Gemini moon situation, right? As well as it being very much the chart, which is quite warlike, you know, Mars, Venus, Sun in Aries in the underworld. So to me, that's an even, it mirrors actually, does it not, the Sun-Venus conjunction that's currently happening, you know. So I hadn't actually put that piece together, you know. So we have Sun-Venus conjunct that just occurred, and now here's Sun-Venus conjunct on that natal chart with Sun, Venus, and Mars in the underworld. So
I'm also noticing this looks like an out of balance moon, isn't it?
Can you immediately? It could be. Well, let's see. Yes, in 1949, it certainly would be. Good catch. Yeah, I think that would be quite out of bounds. Are you able to tell immediately? Do you have your program up?
Yeah, it looks like 27 degrees, almost 28 degrees.
Yeah, that's nearly the extreme out of bounds of a moon. Very interesting. And so that's unassimilatable wild card behavior of Gemini. How about that? And then you have Aries in the underworld at the same time. My hope there would be that they're able to actually come up with some more creative thinking than what they appear to be doing. All right, appear to be doing. I can't say that I know for sure what they're all actually doing. I'm just presenting to you the astrological data here for you to take it from here. I certainly have my own views on this, but I'm trying to strictly go by the astrology and what I know about history. Okay. So maybe the next interesting one to look at would be the chart of the Ukraine. So this is on April 24th, 1991. And this is the birth time of it that is generally used by all the places I looked up. And you can see the Mars in Virgo, for example, that is much involved with the thing we brought up before of the US Mars square Neptune, Neptune opposing Neptune. But certainly there's 2 other things even more remarkable than that. Look at the moon position, 2239 Aquarius. Saturn conjunct the Aquarius moon. And then that moon position is nearly the same degree as Aquarian, well, the US moon in Aquarius, and then the Aquarius, Saturn Aquarius position on the chart of the EU. So I mean, that's pretty stunning, that situation. But something even more interesting, look at the degree of the ascendant with Saturn, 2606 Capricorn. Pluto on Capricorn rising. And again, I have been doing a great deal of research into Russian and Ukrainian history. My wife is always amazed that I'm spending so much time on that. And I said, hey, Daniel, look up your relocation chart, you know. And it turns out that my Capricorn moon is right on the ascendant all through the Ukraine and is dead exact in Odessa, you know, which was always part of Russia. Pluto on Capricorn rising, well, what is our interpretation of that? You know, Pluto is always about composting. And so you could also make an interpretation astrologically here that that the dismemberment of Ukraine is in front of us, actually. You know, basically Poland wants a piece of it, Belarus wants a piece of it. The Russian-speaking area of the Ukraine, of which actually even includes Kiev, they all speak Russian, you know, and that government in 2014 decided to not teach Russian in the schools anymore, you know, and in some of the outer provinces that are mainly all Russian, those people are discriminated against. So that's a very challenging chart, and just pointing that out. And then meanwhile, look at Pluto itself, 17 Scorpio. Right, there's that Taurus-Scorpio axis coming into play again. I don't know how you can ignore these features. By the way, I say the Ukraine because Ukraine means borderland. And throughout history, like there for about a 200-year period, one of the golden era times of Russia was when Kiev was the capital before it moved up to Moscow. And also historically, Poland has had pieces of it. Also, Belarus has had pieces of it. Actually, Moldova, which is wasn't even a country back then, you know, it has this Russian presence there. I don't know. I just look at that chart. I don't know how you can avoid looking at that and saying there's a lot of composting that's happening. And then you have the moon in Aquarius, which happens to be conjunct the Saturn return of the EU. And then how can you avoid looking at that Pluto degree at 17 Scorpio, which is right in the eclipse window at this time period? So there's a lot to look at and unpack there. I don't know how you can avoid some of this stuff. I'm just simply using the techniques and tools of our astrological paradigm in order to unpack this and to see the connection between this chart and the EU and the cycles it's going through, and even the Mars position, the Neptune configuration with Mars. The next one I want to look at that could be of interest is the chart of Russia, or at least one of the charts of Russia, which is often used. This is from following the breakup of the Soviet Union, and I think this is the one that is used by Putin. I'm not 100% certain, but I've been looking at this one a fair amount. And here you see Venus and Pluto conjunct in Scorpio, so that's in that sort of same nodal zone. They already went through their Saturn return, 5-degree Aquarius, Virgo moon, Jupiter in Virgo, Leo rising with Chiron. There's not a huge amount relative to our theme, but we might see some other things when we look at Putin's chart and Biden's chart. I do intend to be doing more research on the what probably the astrologers of Russia are using here. And there are so many. I mean, there's a tremendous interest in the occult and the esoteric in Russia at this particular time. In my own research and reading about Russia, not only have I come upon what Steiner had to say about Russia, but it turns out Edgar Cayce and even DK in the Tibetan, in their readings, and when they were asked about Russia, they said that actually Russia is the hope of the world to get through the time period of the war of all against all, which is how Steiner put it. They are completely re-embraced their Orthodox Christianity, and much to the chagrin of the Roman Church. There's actually, for those who want to do any additional research on this, there's the writings of Steiner about Russia, but also a book called The Return of Holy Russia by Gary Lachman. His books are just really pretty amazing. He actually is in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as a member of Blondie, but since then he's just been a researcher, and he's written biographies of Steiner and Blavatsky, and he's quite erudite, quite a fan connection with Colin Wilson and all of that body of work of the esoteric and the occult. The book even has a chapter on the something that in our school has been a feature of our work, which is the women's fertility cycle based on astrology, which was the kind of stuff that came from Czechoslovakia back in the early 70s. And this is all embraced actually by so many of the, we could say the esoteric underground, which is not so much underground in Russia anymore, far more connection to that stuff than people realize. So you have this chart now for reference. And now I thought it would be interesting to look at Putin and Biden. So here we have Vladimir Putin. And in my own research about Putin, he strongly identifies with Vladimir the Great, Prince Vladimir the Great, who was the ruler of Kiev when the whole dream of Russia actually came together. And here we look at, just look at what we got going on here. Venus in Scorpio, Scorpio rising, the eclipses, exactly, look, I mean, it's just amazing. Even the solar eclipse on the new moon, we've got the 3-degree Scorpio and 3-degree Taurus on the descendant. And also you'll notice the south node with the IC at 1921 Aquarius, and yet Pluto, midheaven, south node. And why am I pointing that out? Because it's the connections between that and the chart we looked at of the EU and the US chart, where the moon north node, moon south node, moon IC connecting. Scorpio rising chart, born in that interesting 1952 time, where Neptune and Saturn were conjunct, very close to his Libra sun, Mercury in Libra. And I must say for him that compared to the leaders of the West, he's schooled in history and quite articulate, actually. Unfortunately, his speeches never come across on the mainstream media in the U.S. But I have seen the translations of them, and just runs rings around the leaders of the neocon leaders of the U.S. It's worth checking, and I'm not taking sides on this. I'm just saying, here, look at the chart, because there's actually the other factor, which is Gemini moon. And the Gemini moon issue is quite intriguing because of the fact that two of these previous in fact, they're still out there. Obama, Gemini moon, John Kerry, who leads the whole green agenda aspect of the Great Reset. They're all Gemini moons. So where is he really coming from? Well, Gemini moon and Scorpio rising. Who knows? Maybe he can shapeshift in many different ways. What a lot of people in America do not know is that actually in the Kremlin, he's the moderate. Basically, the Russians in Ukraine had wanted him to intervene for 8 years after they blew up the Minsk agreement. But he's been actually far more tolerant, actually, of hoping they would come to their senses until the events of the last week. And he's kind of ran out of patience, actually. To really get a sense of what might be happening and what is going on over there, I just advise people looking at all sides, not just the Western mainstream media. Now, with this chart in mind, Venus actually along the timeline, let me just bring this out for further consideration and research. He is, what is that? He's just turned 70. So he's also about to go into his Jupiter return and Venus return. So that's sort of along the timeline, that double jackpot of Venus return and Jupiter return will be happening at the same time for him next year. And that's a considerably different set of conditions along the timeline than the next one we'll look at, which is Joe Biden. Venus, Sun, Mercury, Mars. Venus in the underworld. There's that signature again. Pretty amazing. Sag rising. And then you can imagine the connections between Biden and Putin in those Scorpio areas. The other thing to consider when looking at this guy's chart is that he is in his Mars return. He will be turning 80, and in his when the new Mars cycle begins in early December, he will have completed his Mars return. A Mars return in Scorpio, and then we also find other factors here. There's the moon at 0 Taurus. Well, there's that same connected to the same nodal axis, the same eclipse season. All of these things, I think, should be taken into account. Whether you believe that Joe Biden even still, if that, you know, like whether he's making any decisions or not. I mean, you can still look at the chart and get a sense of what's probably happened to this guy in his Mars return. There's also, most people know that have been following this, there's a lot of secrets in this guy's background and his family's background. And you can then combine this chart with the Ukraine and the whole drama that we've set up here by looking at all the main charts of the players on the world stage at this point. I will say here before we complete this inquiry, that this has been very much a middle world investigation, topical, looking at the charts of what apparently is happening on the world stage. Those that are listening to this with different views can say, how can we tell what's really happening? Well, you certainly can't if you just follow the MSM, the mainstream media. You can follow as many sources as you want if this stuff interests you, but we're certainly talking about now middle world and in many respects underworld, lower world considerations, which has to come up when you look at the Scorpio-Taurus axis. And then also you saw the configurations on, you know, Pluto on the Ukraine chart, on the ascendant, and the US and their Pluto return and so on. we do also value very much the upper world. We look at all these things from a three worlds approach. So from a celestial perspective, from an upper world perspective, there is that view that, you know, the universe is unfolding as it should, that Gaia is handling it, or the sun is handling it, great mystery is handling it. The unfolding is happening just as it should. I do think, though, that in order to have a valid, authentic approach to the upper world, and to take that into account, having an awareness of the middle and the underworld is also important. We can't be in denial about it, and taking into account the actual situation of the end of Kali Yuga, the fourth turning, precessional cycles, the beginning of the sixth sun, the sixth mass extinction, you know, all these things we've talked about in other presentations. But a lot of times, if you just follow the MSM, you don't even know about all of this other stuff. So I'm just bringing it to your attention for consideration. Just as one last little thing of interest, because he's been in the news a lot, particularly with reference to Russia and Ukraine, is that enigmatic figure, the cool billionaire, Elon Musk. And I think we have his chart to look at here too. And to me, he is the epitome of the Mars and Aquarian. You know, but also Gemini rising. And so where does he really stand? What's really going on with him? You know, what's going on with that Twitter situation, and who actually even cares? Because since Twitter is such a controlled platform, what is he doing with the technology? He basically, there's a lot of Elon Musk fanboys out there, but nobody is pushing more the you know, the implantable chip in the brain, and the Starlinks and the 5G and the 6G and everything else. So I think he's a very tricky figure, and the Gemini Venus and Gemini rising is quite interesting. I think we forgot, did we not? We forgot to look at Zelensky's chart. The other Vladimir. And of course, the thing I find so stunning about this is using the tools of the TOTAMS paradigm. Gemini rising, 21-degree Gemini, which just happens to be the exact same degree as the US Mars, and Leo moon, Mars in Leo, the Leo job in the Gemini tribe from the past, the Aquarius job in the Leo tribe the Aquarius job in the Leo tribe for his lineage, and current life purpose, the Leo job in the Gemini tribe. And then plus we have, look, there it is again, Sun conjunct Venus in the underworld. How many times have we seen that signature? I think it's the fourth time regarding these charts we've looked at. And remember, that's what's happening right now. And we'll still be in the underworld at the time of the US election. If I saw, using the tools of the shamanic astrology or the totems astrological paradigm, this is the perfect chart of an actor and a clown, which is essentially what his profession has been until he was, you know, turned into this apparent Churchillian heroic figure. Far from it. Most of what you see of his speeches are a screen share, green screen shares, you know, in the studio somewhere. Is he even there? He might be in his multi-million-dollar home in Florida, or somewhere with his great residence in the UK. Actually, he's rented out his palatial chalet in Italy to Russians, actually. These are all things you're not going to know if you just follow the MSM. So take a look at that chart also, because I think it fits in perfectly into the whole thing. And I've even in other time periods said that he would do well to actually retire to one of those places, because I don't know whether he is going to have a much future in continuing to play out the acting role that he's currently been in. So it's just some things, some alternate views on this. And that's one of the things I like to do. So here you have the charts. You can come up with your own conclusions, research it, and then don't take anything to be true and come to your own conclusions. But how can you come to your own conclusions if you don't see the information in the data? So anyway, if this sparks inquiry and interest and further research, then may it be so. And these next few weeks are going to be off the scales as far as world events, whether it's middle world, whether it's the economics, the digital dollar. I don't know if I think there'll be a stock market crash, but there'll be something probably even more significant taking place here during this eclipse window. So any final thoughts, Awen, from what we've gone through here?
No, I just want to thank you for tuning everybody in to what may be ahead here. It seems like it'll be, if nothing less than an exciting time.
Oh my goodness, yeah, it's but it's really impacting people. It's not just a spectacle. This is not just for entertainment. I mean, this stuff is really super serious as far as what happens to global humanity moving forward. And just to be very clear here, I am not a Russia fanboy. In fact, there's a lot of shadow going on there too regarding their injections, and they're down with the financial global reset as much as anyone. So it's just trying to give different views about what actually may be going on here. I believe it was Joe Biden in one of his Scorpio tantrums said, "There is a new world order and we must lead it." And so it seems to be that's how the EU and NATO is working together with the whoever's running the American government right now to try to make sure that happens.
I know you mentioned some ways of working with the lunar eclipse coming up, and being that this seems to be the eclipse season, is always sort of a spark, as we're pointing out in the charts of individuals. Is there any further insight that you'd like to share with how individuals who aren't world leaders can use this as a spark for maybe bringing about the things that they would like to see in the world?
You mean how to work with the solar eclipse?
Yeah, and then eclipses in general, or this whole season, being that it's a Scorpio Taurus season, it feels pretty powerful.
It's pretty much the same kind of framework that I was suggesting for how to work with the total lunar eclipse. Make sure that you do put attention on those times. Working with a solar eclipse, there's stuff you can actually tune in the time period before the maximum partial. The whole process is a couple of hours, when the sun starts to darken, and then it will go to the maximum point, and then when it goes back to the full sun, as it were. I mean, those are all windows of time, portals, where you can work on this personally and collectively. They're portals of possibilities. And there's a little difference, there's a bit of a difference between whether the eclipse is a north node eclipse or a south node eclipse. But they both involve having to honestly deal with where the shadow material is, both personally or collectively. And then with when that clears out, then you're way more open to receive the transmissions that are coming from great mystery, from Christos Sophia, from Gaia, from the solar deities. You know, the upper world, celestial world forces of good that are there also. So they're not to be ignored, not to be taken lightly. These portals, and so there's the personal way we can work with it, and then there's the those of you who follow this type of astrology, we have a very important part to play. I kind of follow Steiner's view, which is that if you just had 50 or 60 people in a mystery school, you can actually change the world. You know, I mean, it's if you have that focused will in order to create I mean, who knows what great mystery really has in mind? Maybe this is the end of history, the end of the grand experiment, the end of Kali Yuga. However, if our hearts are open and if we're authentic, you know, really what a human being is intended to be, not what is sometimes called human nature, but you know, the genuine human nature of open-heartedness, we can create a prime Earth again. We can, you know, create a new world in the way that people can love each other and be compassionate toward each other. So that's the work of our school to help develop that, to add to that, you know, to contribute to that. Many other groups are too, not the only ones, but we're working the astrological mysteries and the astronomical work mysteries this way. Right.
Beautiful. Thank you.
So what's coming up next is we have our group mentoring over this next week. We have the members call coming up actually for Europeans. Well, you're not going to be seeing this before then, but it's the day we're doing this is coming up for me tonight. So I hope to see some of you there on the Zoom calls coming up. Thank you, Awen, for helping me with this. Your help in the school and helping me do these kinds of presentations is invaluable. So until next month, we'll do another one next month, and who knows what will have happened between now and then. So till then, see you all. Okay. Bye.
All right. Take care.